The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to our webinar this evening, in which Joe and Jane Harling will be talking to us about an introduction to property conversions and title splitting. My name is Wendy, and I'm just going to do a few housekeeping announcements just to make sure that you get the best out of the webinar this evening. You should be able to see a control panel on the right hand side of your screen. They can be different colors if you're on a Mac or a PC or a tablet or a mobile device, but you should have your GoToWebinar control panel on the right hand side, and there's a question box in there. You can type any questions that you have, and we normally hold the questions until the end of a session unless Jane sees a particularly relevant question, and she may answer that immediately. But if you have any technical questions or any technical issues, please type them in and I'll be monitoring that question box and do my best to help you if I can. You should be able to see the PowerPoint slide on your screen now, and the audio should be coming through your speakers on your device, or if you have a USB headset, you can sit in comfort and listen through there. If you're connected through Wi-Fi, sometimes you can get audio disturbances, so there is the option to dial in on the telephone. Again, on your GoToWebinar control panel, in the audio section, select telephone and you'll be given a telephone number, an access code and an audio pin. So you'll be able to hear the audio through the telephone, but still see the PowerPoint slides and type in any questions into the question panel. That's all of the technical bits, I think. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Joe and Jane for your presentation. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Wendy. That was a great introduction, and it's always good to have somebody doing the technical things, because anybody who knows us knows that's not our strong point. We're much better at property developing than we are at IT.
We are not technical people, so we need Wendy.
So who are we anyway, for those of you who don't know us? Well, we're a husband and wife team, and we're based down in Somerset, as no doubt you can hear from my accent, and we develop property. That is, we convert property mainly around the West Country, mainly around Bristol area, about an hour's drive. We've been doing this for about 20 years now, and you know, we fell into this purely by accident. We started converting some properties, some flats above hairdressing salons that we owned. So we had absolutely no history of property development in the family. None of our families were builders or property developers or anything. So it's definitely a case of no matter what experience you've got at the present, that's no barrier at all. You can certainly become really successful at property developing wherever you're starting from. And that is the whole point of today's webinar, is basically if you've been doing a little bit of buy-to-let, maybe some HMOs and something, and you fancy getting into development, but it's kind of all a bit big and scary, isn't it? And you hear people talking about developments, and they're talking about housing estates and lots of new build and all that kind of stuff. And you think, oh, where do I start? Where do I start? It's all quite big and scary. So that's what we're talking about today. Introduction to property developing, but particularly looking at converting existing properties, which is the strategy that we've fell into. So over the last 20 years, we've been doing listed properties, which an awful lot of people shy away from, but hopefully we'll be able to show you at some point during this evening that there's absolutely no need to fear them at all. We've been doing lots of commercial property, as we keep commercial as well as convert it. That's another angle a lot of people are quite frightened of, but we needn't be. But we don't just do the commercial to resi. You know, we convert residential property to different residential property. You know, there's opportunities all around, and, you know, to all different things. So tonight, we just want to explain how you can get into developing yourself, but in a safe and a manageable way. Nothing too big and scary, and you know, you get yourself in deeper in trouble than you may fear, and so on. You don't have to do that. So
nothing would take a terrible long time to do.
No, safe, manageable, quick conversions, especially if you haven't got a lot of experience in doing this kind of thing. So the thing is that these conversions we're not talking about new build. We're talking about converting an existing property. So we're talking about bringing back old buildings, those empty, derelict buildings, often buildings that people haven't really got any use for anymore. They're just not suitable for modern sort of day living and so on. And we're bringing back these buildings, which nobody's got any use for, into beautiful housing, which is what people want to live in and what people want to buy. So, there's a lot of talk out there, isn't there, about, us property developers, us property landlords, being the bad guys, and that we take, housing away from first-time buyers and all that kind of stuff. And, it's simply not true. But this is a really, really great way of demonstrating this, to the press and to, the local community. We're the good guys. What we do is we actually take these defunct buildings and we bring them back into use. We make housing. We don't take away housing. We make housing. And that's a really good PR exercise that you can put out locally. And the planning, it's much easier on a conversion than it is on a new build. There's much, much less things to consider and so on. So, that's another thing not to to discount easily. And even a lot of this can be done under a form of permitted development called prior approval. But we'll be looking at that in quite some depth a little bit later on. So they're quite easy to finance as well, these projects, because you see you've got an existing property there. So it's quite easy to get bridging finance in order to do the initial bridge, because there's actually something tangible there immediately to bridge. And then once you've got your planning permission all in in hand and so on, then then you can morph it into a development finance. And it's said that you need experience to get development finance, but that's not, strictly speaking, that's not true, because you just need to demonstrate that on your team somebody has got experience. So as long as you either set up some kind of structure, like a company or something, and somebody within that company or a consultant that you can prove is very actively involved in the project, then that's no barrier then in order to get the development finance. So that's not even a barrier in that regard, which is a lot easier than it is for new build. So let's take a look then at what we can convert here. So let me just move on to the next slide if I can. There we go. So these are just some properties here, the kind of things which we would suggest, if you haven't done a great deal of developing before, are the kind of projects that are quick, simple and easy to get into. So let's look at the first one up on the top left-hand side. Very obviously a shop with just a building. You see a Velox at the top of it. Now, converting the space above shop premises is really, really easy to do, and it's a great place to start. You see, councils are really in favour of this, because if you can imagine, you've got like a town or something with, it's 6 o'clock or so, the shops close, and then everybody kind of leaves the area, and quite often the town becomes susceptible to quite a lot of crime, graffiti, kids hanging about the place. And,
young children.
Young children, as Joe's saying there. And councils don't like this. It's quite a threat to them. And if they can encourage people to live actually in that area, so the area is populated on an evening, they find it cuts down crime hugely. And for this reason, they look very favourably on converting empty space above shop premises into flats and into living accommodation. Now, so long as the building isn't a listed building and it's not in a national park or in a conservation area or a couple of other things which we'll talk about a little bit later, as long as it's in none of those kind of constraining areas, you can actually convert above a shop premises, which is A1 or A2 use, that's a standard sort of shop retail use, you can convert up to 2 apartments above that purely by using a form of permitted development prior approval. And the beauty of that is that the council, so long as you go by the guidelines of the prior approval, and it is still an application, it's very hard for them to turn it down. And moreover, they cannot dictate hugely what you can do inside those premises either. So if you wanted to put sort of, 2 1-beds or something, it may well be your local council's policy to have a mix, and they may say, no, we don't want all 1-beds, we want a 2-bed and a 1-bed or something. But they cannot actually dictate the inner layout. But as I said, up to 2 flats you can do under prior approval. But what this means, though, is that you can't alter the shop front. So you can't think, oh, I'm going to be a bit clever here. We're going to have a tiny shop front, and then the whole back of the building we're going to make into, another flat or something amazing there. You can't do that. So the shop front has to stay as it is, and the retail would have to stay actually at the front and actually on the ground floor. That's not to say that it wouldn't be possible to convert the whole lot into more than 2 flats, or convert the entire premises into residential. But then we're coming in the realms of a full planning application, which we'll talk about later. There's absolutely no problem with that at all. It's just that it's a slightly different application to the prior approval, so slightly more onerous. But having said that, onerous conditions bring opportunities, which we'll talk about. Anyway.
If I can add to that, when Jane's saying onerous, we love problems. The more problems there are, the less people you will find in the queue trying to buy the property.
Hey, but today was an introduction to property conversions, Joe. Next week we've got an advanced webinar.
I'll keep quiet.
Where we're talking about the kind of problems that Joe loves, because as Joe said, whenever there's problems, indeed there are greater opportunities. So these shops then developing into 2 flats above. Councils absolutely love these applications. Really, really easy to get the planning applications through, and they're really quick and simple to do. You should be in and out of one of these in 6 months really quite easily. Shouldn't be difficult at all. About 8 weeks for the prior approval application to go through, then just converting the premises inside. Really, really not difficult to do, in and out within 6 months at all, and huge potential for profits, which we'll talk about a bit later. I just want to mention, though, one proviso here, and that is just be careful of what you allow to go into your shop below. So don't think, if somebody approaches you and wants to do like a hot food takeaway or something, just be very, very mindful that whatever you put on the ground floor, to a certain extent, may limit the mortgageability, and it may limit the desirability of the flats up above. So, and don't forget, if you limit the mortgageability and the desirability, you therefore hugely affect the value. So I would strongly suggest that if you're going to develop above retail premises, keep those premises retail. And if you can get something like an estate agent or an accountant's office, or something like that, then that's the perfect kind of tenant to get, because there'll be they won't make the flats up above any less desirable. Hot food is the biggest no-no that you want to stay away from. But then let's go over to the right-hand side there. Here we've got a standard Victorian terrace. Kind of every town in the country has these, doesn't it? Standard Victorian terraces. And they convert brilliantly. Now, alongside these, I'm also going to include here ex-local authority houses, because these houses are often really, really spacious, get much, much bigger rooms, and they also convert brilliantly. So here we're suggesting 1 flat upstairs, 1 flat downstairs. Really quick, really simple to do. Does need a full planning application. There's no permitted development in this, but that's not an issue at all. But the advantage of these, apart from it being, again, really quick and simple, should be in and out within 6 months, no problem. You can maximise the rental income of this Victorian terrace far more than a family house. Maybe not to the extent of a standard HMO, except if you do it into two completely separate units, the tenants are paying all the bills, you're not having to manage roomlets, the voids are much less, you've just got one tenancy upstairs, one tenancy downstairs. They pay the council tax, they look after it and so on, and much easier to manage. And the rental yield can quite often, when you look at it, all things considered, taking into account voids and bills and that type of stuff, can be really quite comparable to what you'd get on an HMO, but I would suggest with a lot less of the hassle there. So once you've got the separate units, they can be sold as separate flats, or indeed you can refinance them on separate buy-to-let mortgages and get most, if not all, of the money back out again, and then go on to your next project straight away. So they're great to learn on as well, because you see the thing is that going into the two flats, you still got to do soundproofing, still got to do fire regulations. That's a complete essential in everything, every kind of development you do. Fire is completely non-negotiable. And insulation, you've still got to insulate all the external walls, insulate between units and so on. And so it's a great project to learn on, because you see, when you're doing two flats like this, it's not really a lot different to doing 6 flats or 10 flats. The soundproofing's the same, the fire regulations are the same, you're following exactly the same principles, but you're kind of cutting your teeth on something a whole lot simpler, smaller, quicker, easier to manage. So buy it, get your money in and out, no time at all.
So I could just add to that. The slightly bigger, the more floors you go up, it does slightly alter the fire regulations. You do need to have a few more regulations the higher the properties.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Smoke escape hatches and that kind of thing. So, but if we go down to the bottom left-hand corner now, it's another like an Edwardian end terrace here, a semi. But this one was actually already converted. This one was already flats, except they were holiday flats. And they'd got a bit tired and so on. But there they were, all completely separate. They all had their own kitchens, they all had their own bathrooms, they were all soundproofed and all that type of thing. So they offer really great opportunities, because you see, if it's holiday flats, all you need to do is get a change of use planning application, which if they're failing holiday flats and there's a surplus of them in the area, and believe me, nearly every seaside town in Britain does have a surplus of them, again, we've never ever had trouble getting those through planning whatsoever. And sometimes you can find that these kind of properties were converted into flats, maybe in the 60s or 70s, the 80s and so on, converted into flats just so it'd be easy for the landlord to manage. But he never split the title, he never refinanced, he never wanted to sell, so there was never really any point in him doing so. So they're all still on one title, but they are still 4 or so completely separate standalone units. And all you need to do in that circumstance is prove that they've been completely separate standalone units for 10 years or more, and you prove this with council tax records, ASTs, utility records, anything like that. You can prove to the council that they've been separate units for 10 years, then you get a certificate of established use. And that certificate is as good as planning permission, and that means that that will satisfy any solicitor or lender. So
add in a little bit more to this as well. Like Jane said, you need to prove for 10 years, but you don't prove it. It's your vendor. Bear in mind, your vendor wants to sell his property. He may have a great need to sell his property. So for him to sell his property, he will go through all the hassle of finding all the tenancies and all the gas bills, all the electric bills, all the utility bills and everything. So it may sound a bit onerous that you've got to prove it for 10 years, but your vendor will be finding this information out for you.
If he wants to sell it, then that may be what he's got to do. And people are surprisingly well organised as well. People usually, we find, tend to keep pretty good records, and we've never had any problems here. So the main work being done here is being done by your lawyers, being done by your planner. It's not being done by you. Not a great deal of physical work going on there. Having said that, though, most of these kind of properties, you're talking about doing a refurb. They're usually pretty tired and so on. But the conversion itself is usually actually done. So then down onto the right hand side, here we're moving on to something a little bit bigger here, and we would suggest that you don't dive straight in and do one of these as your first project and so on. But this actually here was is a listed office to resi conversion, which went into 8 apartments, and you can see at the back there's a small sort of beige cottage there that actually came within the curtilage. So with these kind of larger projects like this, you know, you can look for offices to convert, care homes, they're great conversions to look at. Hotels, you know, these small independent hotels, nearly all seaside resorts, you know, and a lot of towns indeed have got them. And now that, you know, travel lodges, Premier Inns are literally moving in everywhere, these hotels are pretty much suffering. You see, you know, it's like, I don't know about you, but, you know, if we need to go to a town we've never been to before and we're just looking to stay one night, we just go online and look at the local Premier Inn. You know what you're getting, don't you? So that's kind of what we do. And I think an awful lot of other people do that as well, because these independent hotels have been suffering for many, many years now. And also, you know, bed and breakfast. And they convert absolutely brilliantly, because usually there's loads of plumbing and that kind of stuff there as well. So they're really helpful. And talking about decline in businesses as well, pubs offer a great opportunity. So many pubs closing down all over the country. Again, they convert brilliantly. All of these we're talking about now, full planning applications, but, you know, as I said, that's not an issue. Then we've got police stations, loads of those for some reason coming on the market at the moment. And banks, we've seen a huge number of banks. Again, they will all convert into either residential property or not necessarily residential, but a mix of commercial and resi. You don't have to limit yourself to commercial to resi. It's kind of become a bit of a cliche, I think, in the property world. And everyone kind of refers to conversions as being commercial to resi. But strictly speaking, that's not true. Don't limit yourself to that. You know, think about, you know, keeping things commercial, keeping things resi. You know, as Joe says, like the Salvation Army, you know, we don't turn anything down, and as long as it's there, you know, we'll convert it. You know, if
it doesn't move, we'll convert it,
as he says. And so with this in mind, take a look at those big old houses as well. You know, we're talking about houses that, you know, in Victorian and Edwardian England, where people had huge families and so on, you know, people wanted 8 bedrooms and so on. And the trouble is, like, 8 bedrooms now, unless you're looking to do an HMO, if it doesn't have a big garden, you know, or a sort of very, very desirable area, you know, it's kind of not the demand, is there? People aren't really looking for that kind of accommodation anymore. So these big old houses, they're also really, really ripe for conversion. So down on this bottom right-hand corner here, we're looking at multiple flats there. But as I said, soundproofing, certainly over 2 floors, even fire regs, you're looking at the same kind of principles. You know, there's not a huge amount of difference there. So, you know, cut your teeth on something smaller and then move to something larger when you've got a little bit more confidence and so on. Because bear in mind that when you're getting down to something like, you know, an 8 to a 10, you know, apartment thing, you're talking a longer time scale. You're not going to be in and out there within 6 months. You know, you could be 18 months, something like, maybe even up to 2 years if the planning, you know, has been onerous or something. So, yeah, these smaller projects, just title splits and that kind of stuff, like the holiday flats, talking 6 months, something like that. So nice, in and out, quick, you know, quick conversion. So let's move on then and just take a look at cakes. Great analogy for title splitting. So for those of you who don't know what title splitting is all about, in principle, and this is an analogy that we've been using for several years now, but we notice there are quite a few other cakes cropping up on the property circuit. But hey, you know, our cakes.
Copying our cake.
Yes. So
we've got the original.
We've got the original cake.
Still in the sell by date.
So we'd all agree, wouldn't we? I think that you can go out and you can buy a cake like we've got in front, a great carrot cake here for £10 or something like that. Everyone would, fair value for it. But then if you go away and you cut that cake into 10 slices and you wrap up those cakes in individual slices, you could then sell each slice of cake for, say, £2 a slice, which means that your cake is now worth £20 as opposed to £10. Now, still the same cakes, the same ingredients and everything, except it's now arranged in a different legal format. And because of that, that is what has enhanced its value, and that's what's forced the value. That and the fact that you've got planning permission for it. That is basically the principle of title splitting. So you buy your property on one title, your pub or your care home or your big old house on one title, a freehold title, or it also works with a long lease as well. That's also quite quite feasible. So you've got your property on one title. So then you cut your property into slices of cake or flats or commercial units or anything like that. So then you've got to individually wrap your slices of cake or your units, whatever you've created. And to do that, that's when you create your new leases here, okay? And so you've then got a freehold company which literally holds all of your slices of cake together. And for the analogy for that, we're using the cake box. So you see how all your slices of cake are all held together in the cake box. That's kind of all your leases will then be all held together in a freehold company. And the freehold company will collect ground rents from each of your individual units. And if these leases are constructed cleverly and carefully with the correct amount of ground rent and so on, these freehold companies can have a huge value of their own. And we're talking like tens of thousands here. It's pension companies, they buy them, and also the London auction houses. There's an Orthodox Jewish community are very much buyers of these freehold companies because they're looking for the future value. They're looking for what are these freehold companies going to be worth in 50 years or 100 years time and so on. So there's another great opportunity there. And if you're looking to convert one of your properties into individual flats, you do need to create these separate leases, because unless your flat is leasehold, you won't be able to either refinance it yourself or you won't be able to sell it to a first-time buyer, because you can't get a mortgage on a freehold flat in England. So that's kind of, because the thing is, what you've got to bear in mind is, say for instance you've got 4 flats in a block. So what happens if the roof leaks? So what a mortgage company is going to be concerned about is that if they've got the top flat and the roof is leaking into their flat, it's not fair that you should have to pay for the whole of the roof, is it? So what they're looking for is leases to be created and a management company to be involved in the running of the whole block, in order that the internal areas, the structure of the building and so on is all fairly taken care of. But that's kind of going a little bit deep for an introduction webinar, which is what tonight is really
also if I can add to that, you're not doing the work again there, as Jane said before. Your solicitors are doing the work, and you just find the right people to do the title splitting, the legal work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. As Joe's saying, this, it might sound oh my goodness, this is all sounding a bit too complicated or involved, but it isn't something that, once you get into this, you want to know a little bit enough to make sure that your lawyer or whoever is doing your leases, is doing them diligently and correctly and so on. But ultimately, hey, this isn't something that you've got to do, as Joe said. So don't have any fear that, oh my goodness, this is all sounding terribly hard and so on, because this isn't, you direct it, you don't actually
it's part of your power team. Your power team are doing it.
It's a bit like we say, Joe knows how to plumb a bathroom, but he doesn't actually go and plumb our bathrooms anymore. You employ a plumber to, plumb the bathroom, don't you? Yes, that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? So let's go and take a look at some of these profits that you can get on properties like this. So going back to the little shop at the top on the left-hand side. So this particular one here, now this one actually was done quite a while ago here, but the principle still absolutely holds true. This was actually, when we bought it, a completely derelict building, and I don't laugh, we actually paid 10,000 for this. It was that derelict. It really was very, very derelict in a market town. Nobody wanted it. It looked quite scary and so on. And but you know, it wasn't actually as bad as what it appeared at first appearances. We had sort of jobbing builders, not main contractors at all, do the work here. Went into 2 flats up above, a 1 flat and a 2 flat. You see a commercial unit on the ground floor, stayed commercial. And we spent 60,000 literally on subcontractors here doing the actual refurb there. Spent about 30,000 on all the other holding costs and other expenses. And this was a full planning application. So, you know, talking about all the different costs here, like there's the planning, the legals, the stamp duty, the cost of the refinance, the agent's cost to sell. You know, there's quite a few costs to take into account. And instantly at this point, if any of you listening would like a copy of a spreadsheet that we use, we call it our cost spreadsheet. If you just want to email, in fact, we'll send this link out to you afterwards anyway. But if you want to email jj@jjharling, that's HARLING.com, and just say, can I have a copy of the cost spreadsheet? We'll email you a copy out, because what it is a list of all the other kind of costs. It's not exhaustive actually, but it should cover most of the ones you're going to come across. Most of the additional costs that you might want to take into account when you're costing a project other than the building works. So
Can I just, sorry, add,
okay.
I'm just going to add a bit more to the 90k one, the top left-hand corner. And like Jane said, we did actually buy this for 10,000. Most of the properties we do are commercial properties. The people selling commercial properties are business-minded people. The agents, the commercial agents, are business-minded people. So they made a commercial decision. Do we sell this for this ridiculously low price to this cheeky whippersnapper, or do we hang on to it and pay all of our holding costs, and we may not sell it? So they made a commercial decision and they sold it. So the nice thing with commercial buildings is you are dealing with business-minded people. You can make outrageous offers.
So, like so, you know, we bought it for 10. We spent 60 subcontractors doing really quite a major refurb, about 30,000 on all the other expenses and so on. And we actually sold that property after we ran our own business out of it for a number of years. We actually sold it for 190. So it was a nice 90,000 profit in there, and it wasn't difficult or onerous to do at all. The one on the right hand side, the Victorian terrace there, that's just a Victorian terrace in a suburb of Bristol, which we bought for about 130,000 there. It's a pretty good nick. You know, it's just one of those tired Victorian terraces. An older person had lived in it, and you know, structurally it was pretty sound. Planning permission to do that into 2 flats, exactly as what we've been describing. Refurb cost about 50,000 on that. Minimal amount of soundproofing. You're only talking about just in between the top flat and the bottom flat. Insulation, it's a terrace. You only got to insulate the front walls and under the floor and the ceiling, and the back wall, yeah. And the fire regulations just needs an integrated fire system, and you know, fire doors, and just fireproofing in between the actual dwellings. And of course there's only 2 dwellings there, so it's not really a huge onerous job to do at all. And that valued up afterwards at 260,000, so 60k profit in there, and we still actually own that. We're talking like 11 years on, we own it, never have any voids there, never hear from the tenants, and you know, great rental income is just 2 flats. The one down on the bottom left hand corner, this was the holiday flats that we looked at. And we bought this for 240,000, but we didn't need to convert it because they were already converted. but they were tired. So we just spent 15,000 on each flat. I think we put in new kitchens, bathrooms, that kind of stuff, paint job, carpets, and that kind of, so on. And the costs were about 30,000. We managed to keep the holding costs down quite low here because we had a delayed completion here, where we exchanged contracts subject to planning, went away and got the planning permission, and then we completed on it once all the planning was done, and we were able to just, simply let it out on full-time, residential AST straight away. Split the title because the titles hadn't been split. So the end title valued up at 395,000 for all of the individual slices of cake, so to speak, added up all together. So it was a nice 65k there for little more than a handyman going in and doing basic paint job refurbs and the solicitor splitting the titles, really. And then you get on to the bigger profits when you look at the larger developments and so on. This was bought in a market town, Shepton Mallet. We paid 295 for this. It's 8 flats and a refurbishment of a cottage, and the build cost came to 325 on this. All the other associated costs, about 160,000 here, should value up at about 980. It's actually going on the market at the end of the month, so just coming to the end of a project I'm working on there. And that is indeed, we did do some individual local courses, including tours at that property, and we're now hurriedly looking around to see where we can move our local courses to, because you can't see any soundproofing and fire insulation and so on, because it's all covered over now, all decorated and painted and so on. So that's not an option to do anymore.
A little gold nugget Jane gave there on the 65k one, when Jane said about getting your local handyman in. You don't always need to get a builder. If you're just doing like refurbs, you can get your handyman in to do your jobs, not a local builder.
Yeah. So, just want to talk a bit now. We've got a brand new course coming up. Now, we've spent this last year in the main doing one course, and we've been really aware that on this course sometimes you can see some poor folk with their eyes kind of glazing over, thinking, oh my goodness, what is she talking about now? Because I'm talking about, constructing leases and capital allowances and goodness knows what. And they're thinking, I just want to know how to do, to get into this game right at the beginning. And then there's other people who say, yeah, but I want to know, I want to know about what company structure should I use? What's the VAT implications of all this kind of stuff? And they want to talk about, really involved things, which are going to go even more confusing to somebody who's not even done any of this at all. So for this year, we're actually splitting things out. We're actually doing 2 completely different courses. So we're doing a brand new course, which we're kind of like chunking up, if you like. We're making it a little bit less complicated, spending more time on the actual basics, on how to find great deals, how to work out whether or not they stack at all, are they worth doing, how to negotiate the planning maze, what's prior approval, what's planning, full plans, what property needs what, builders, how to choose your builders, how to sort of evaluate what the building costs are going to be, and so on. And the building regs, it's not just a refurb, but just looking at, soundproofing, that kind of stuff. What kind of fire regulations are going to be expected of you? Title splitting, just some of the things that you need to be aware of, just to make sure that your lawyer is creating your leases diligently and properly, so that you will get the maximum value out of your your freehold company at the end. Because the problem is that a lot of local high street solicitors kind of know what they're doing, but they don't really, because it's like if you want heart surgery, you don't go, do you, to you don't go to your local GP. Heart surgery, you go to a specialist. And likewise for title splitting, that's definitely what you need to do. You need to go to a property specialist lawyer. This is well to know what you're looking out for.
Your freehold can be worth tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands.
And then lots of exits, for maximum safety. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those at the end as well. So that course, the introduction to conversions and title splitting, is really aimed at you if you've done maybe a couple of buy-to-lets, maybe an HMO or two, but you haven't really done a lot of big conversion work and so on. And you want to know the basics, how to get into this safely and quickly and effectively and not go wrong just on your first projects or so on. And earn some pretty decent chunks of money, some pretty decent profit as well. So this particular course is on Friday the 20th of January, and it's at a Holiday Inn in Birmingham, and it's going to include all refreshments, sit-down lunch, full workbook, and everything. It's going to be a pretty full day, but you know, if you've not done much of this development stuff before, it's not going to go over your head. So no worries about that.
But you will learn a lot.
You will learn loads.
Yeah.
But let's go on with some more education, shall we? So different types of planning. And I've just noticed here that joining the attendees, we've got Andrew. Now Andrew's actually our planning consultant, our planner, a technician who we've been working with for probably 15 years or something like that now. And you know what? We've never had a conversion project fail yet. So that's all down to Andrew, and he's listening now. So
and even a grade 2 star.
Grade 2 star listed. Yeah.
We got through the planning.
Yeah. So big shout out there for Andrew Hurst, CAD planner of Bristol. Yes. So just take a look here anyway at some kind of projects you can get through under permitted development or the prior approval scheme. So on the left hand side here, you've got the typical shop that we were talking about. You've got shops, A1, A2 use for the whole building here. So you can actually, under prior approval, which is a form of permitted development, get planning through for up to 2 flats above. So like we said, got to leave the shop front downstairs, got to leave the commercial on the ground floor, but you can do the 2 flats up above. Really quite a simple application, because you see, as long as you don't come across any highways issues or any noise problems or any flood issues or contamination, which you're not going to find contamination more than likely on, you know, this kind of project. As long as it, you know, is an A1, A2 use for the whole building, you know, the council can't refuse you. So it's really quick and simple. But as I said, it is an application. You do need somebody to actually put this application in and prepare it, submit it for you. And it will take between 6 to 8 weeks to go through. So, you know, do build that into your calculations. But it's really quick, really simple to go through. And it's quite a nice project as well, because a lot of the, you know, the big guys out there doing the commercial to resi and everything, it's kind of, it's too small for them. And so it's really quite interesting, because it's too small for the big guys to really be bothered with, but it's too scary for somebody just buying their first buy-to-let property. So you've kind of got this middle level here where you're not going to meet as much competition. So there's some great opportunities out there and some great bargains to be found. You find absolutely loads of these shops with A1, A2 use for the whole building. Great for converting flats up above. And next to it, we've got a typical office building here. Now, this one, I mean, these aren't ours. These are just typical ones I found on the internet here. The one on the right, beware, it may be a listed building, but let's assume for the purpose of what we're talking about here, it's not. Standard office building. This is the typical office to resi conversion. And as we said, so long as there's no highways, noise, flood, or contamination issues, you can convert the inside of that property, as long as it's B1 office use, into residential flats, more or less how you like. And so, you see, it may well be that if this was a full planning application, it may well be that the local council will say, yeah, okay, I don't want, you know, overdevelopment here. I don't want kind of 3 flat, you know, we'd like a mix of flats. So we'll have a 3-bed flat, we'd like a couple of 2 beds, and maybe a couple of 1 beds there. And you say, oh, but I wanted to put in 10 studios. Oh, well, we're not happy about that, 10 studios. No, we like a nice mix of flats. And that may not work for you financially as well. And so this is a real beauty of this prior approval, that they can't dictate the inner layout. So if you want to go and put your 10 studios in there, yeah, hey, go ahead and do that. As I said, as long as it you don't fall foul of highways, noise, flood, or contamination, there's not really a lot they can do about it. So I said, I can't dictate the inner layout, so great, you know, opportunities here. But Slight downside is that there's an awful lot of people doing this now. Lots of competition out there. So don't expect the same bargains to be found on a standard prior approval office to resi conversion, because as I said, there is competition out there for that. So you may want to look at things where you do need full planning applications, because those applications, those projects are the ones that your average commercial to resi person shies away from. And that's not actually necessary at all.
It's like Jane's saying, we've done dozens and dozens and dozens of conversions with the help of Andrew, and touch wood, we have never had to date any refused.
No. So but there's certain things that we certainly talk about on the course in great detail, about the way we go about planning and so on, which up and down the country, as we talk at various property meetings, we find an awful lot of people don't have that same experience. So that is something that we do go into in quite some depth. But let's take a look here at some different types of planning. So we've got the shop up here on the top left-hand corner. So like I said, if this wasn't a listed building, then you could go for prior approval there. But this one was a listed building, and it is in a conservation area. So for that means you've got to go for a full planning application. You've also got to go for a change of use if the upstairs floors aren't already residential. This will scare an awful lot of other developers away, and because of that, that drives down competition, and when you've got less competition, that's when you get the bargains. So as I said, that's Shepton Mallet there, needed full planning permission, needed a change of use and so on, but because of that, the competition wasn't out there, and we were able to buy it for the ridiculously low price. And
if I add to that as well, like Jane saying, we needed full planning for it, but bear in mind our offer was subject to planning. So we worked it all out. We knew what we could put in there. We knew what we were going to spend. We knew how much it'd be worth after. But if our planning didn't get accepted, we'd lost was a small fee for the solicitors doing it. Yeah. So again, we were working with commercially minded people who agreed subject to planning.
The little Victorian terrace in the middle. Now you might think that that would go under prior approval, but it doesn't. Sadly, it doesn't. So if it is a full planning application, but so we've never had one fail. So as long as you're respectful and you don't try and you don't try it on too much, you don't try and squeeze and shoehorn things in and overdevelopment, because there's one thing that planners don't like, is over intensity of the site. They don't like things shoehorned into here and there. So as long as you're sensible about it, on something like this, to get application in for one flat upstairs and one flat downstairs, really, really quite easy to do. Just bear in mind, that you've got 8 weeks for your planning application, a couple of weeks for it to be registered and so on, plus the time for your application to be, prepared and so on. So just bear in mind, build those weeks in, into your calculations and so on. And then let's go over onto the right-hand side. Now, this is one of those old hotels I was talking about earlier. This one here. Was a failing hotel, long since stopped being desirable for normal residents and kind of turned into a little bit of a hostel. And it was even kind of failing at that when we got it. A listed building as well, so it did need a full planning application and a change of use. Now, as long as these hotels aren't right on the seafront, they're usually, again, really easy to get planning permission for, because the last thing councils want, decaying properties, going empty and this kind of stuff. And so if they're not on the seafront, right on the promenade, most councils are really quite relaxed about allowing change of use for these seaside hotels. And again, in cities and towns, they're not usually too bothered at all, because the demand for them is just not there anymore. So you've got a full planning application there. It was a listed building, so you've got a listed application as well. But again, as long as you're respectful to the listed building, and you're not trying to alter its appearance and take out its historic features and everything, generally find conservation officers want to work with you, because that's what they're looking for, isn't it? They want those, they just want these listed buildings to stay in a good state of repair, and and to be used to their full benefit. So down on the left-hand side, at the bottom, this is the holiday flats. So this is the ones where already arranged as flats. So if it's holiday flats, you do need to get a change of use, a full planning application in to change it to residential use. Again, not onerous to do, just a straightforward full planning application. Would suggest in that instinct you try and get either an option to purchase subject to planning or an exchanged contract subject to planning, just on the outside chance that it doesn't go through. But as I said, we haven't actually had one of those fail. And if it's already arranged as flats, residential use, prove that it's been like that for 10 years, and then you can get your certificate of established use. And that's as good as any planning application. So you can split the title, go away and get a separate buy-to-let mortgage on the back of that established use certificate, or sell it, and any of your buyers, any of their residential mortgages will find that just as satisfactory. And then, as I said, over on the bottom, we're looking at an office to resi. So that was a change of use application. It's another listed building. So that was a listed application. And because it's listed and in a conservation area as well, we're looking at a full planning application. Just a little point of interest I'm going to point out here, and is that the little cottage at the back, although it's old, it's got no historic features. Ordinarily, that would never ever have been listed. But because it was in the grounds of the big listed building, in the curtilage, it took on listed status. So that also needed a full planning application. So just bear in mind, one thing I want to point out here with this change of use here is that you've got to prove lack of demand in the area. And this one actually took 12 months to do that. So you may need to prove that it's been marketed sufficiently and at what price and what interest has been shown and so on. You may need to prove that there isn't actually any demand for that office or that hotel or whatever. But we're running out of time very shortly, but I just want to go and talk now about just profit and safety and exits here. Because one thing that we do see, which last thing we would want anybody just starting out into development to get into, is to find themselves that they've developed beautiful flats or something, but then the market changes and they're stuck. They can't do anything with it. Their finance runs out or something or other. So we think that we advise that you should always have at least 2, preferably 3 viable exits to any project that you do. So just some of the exits that you could look at. So you can create your separate individual flats, create the separate leases on them, and then sell them, to first-time buyers, families, couples, whatever, or to other investors if you want individual units. Or alternatively, you could take out separate buy-to-let mortgages on each of those flats. You'd have to use separate mortgage companies. You won't find one mortgage company, like one buy-to-let company, would be happy to take over the whole block. They like to spread their risks. So you'll probably find if you've got, say, 6 flats in a block, you might find 3 different companies might do, 2 flats each or something. So you could refinance and let it out individually on separate ASTs. Could, of course, retain the commercial element and then let out the shop or below on a commercial let, or even sell it to a commercial tenant. We love commercial tenants. It's something that we actually talk about on quite a degree in our courses, because commercial tenants are great. Completely different strategy, but we love them anyway. Now, you don't have to, of course, convert into 1-bed flats or 2-bed flats. There's nothing to stop you converting, into pods or units. So there's nothing to stop you converting into, like, say, for instance, you had a big property which you thought, oh, I could get 20 HMO rooms, but do I really want to manage a 20-bed HMO.
Will the neighbours be happy with a 20-bed HMO?
What kind of tenants are going to want to live in a 20-bed HMO? Might be better to create, say, 4 pods where you can let out 5 rooms in each pod. That means that each unit, people are only sharing with 4 other people. So you kind of may get an easier to run unit there. Or you could be a bit creative there and maybe do 2-bed flats with 2 living rooms and a study and multi-let, it's just an idea, You
How creative you are.
You might find neighbours might find that more palatable than 4 HMO pods.
Definitely.
Yep. Could do serviced accommodation. A few provisos here. That's strictly speaking, serviced accommodation is C1 and not C3 use, but an awful lot of people do it on C3. Just beware of your local. Check out your local council, your local areas. They may have restrictions. There's some, like for instance, some boroughs of London, you're only allowed to do like Airbnb for 90 days and that kind of stuff. And so just check that out. But undoubtedly, very profitable way. We've got some friends up in Harrogate who actually service accommodate and have got a really cracking business there. That's the way they let out all of their conversions and so on. It works fantastically for them. And you could also consider a long-term let. What we're talking about here is maybe letting out on a commercial, to sort of like a charity or an institution. Can maybe let it out for 5 years or something like that. Lock in your, just lock your tenants in and so on.
Not literally.
Not literally. No, it's a great safe strategy.
It's an ideal though.
No, which might be something that you might want to take a look into. So so looking at the, I said there's 2 courses we're actually moving on to. So the introduction course on the 20th of January, we're looking at, it's very much going to be aimed if you've only done a few buy-to-lets, couple of HMOs or something like that, not done a lot of development, and you want to spend time on the getting to know how you can really get started and really sort of get cracking on this, and not go away with your head all in a spin thinking, oh my goodness, this is all too complicated for me, I can't do this. So looking at how to find the great deals, working out if they stack financially, working out if they stack practically as well. Negotiating the planning maze, what is going to be prior approval, what is going to be planning and so on, full plans, choosing your builders, getting the quotes in, building regs, that kind of stuff. Title splitting, so you can sell and actually, you can actually exit your property, your project, and you've worked hard on this project. You want to make sure that you get obviously the maximum profit for all your hard work, show for it. And again, lots of exits for maximum safety. So we've been doing this for like 20 years now. Been through, well, you actually remember the 89 to 91 credit crunch and so on. Seen an awful lot of heartbreak along the way and so on. So we're very much into safety here, very much into talking about people having lots of viable exits so you don't get left holding the baby, so to speak, and a lot more, we'll be going into as well. This is actually a 1-day course. In February, we are actually doing a 2-day advanced course, and that one will actually be held in Maidenhead. But we've got another webinar next week on the 11th, where we'll be talking more about advanced, strategies and so on. But as you'd expect from any webinar, and we're no different. If you want to book online, if you want to take advantage of this course, we've got a webinar discount, and no surprise there. And we're taking off $297. Now this is only going to be available for the next 48 hours. And I've had a very strict moral warning from Wendy, who's introduced us early, who does all our IT. She said, if we're doing this for 48 hours, we must do this for 48 hours and only, to be fair to, you guys who have come on to the webinar tonight.
To be with us tonight.
Absolutely. So if you go on to www.winwinpropertybuyers.co.uk, which is our standard website, /introduction-property-conversions, and use the discount code webinar offer 200-117, that will take £100 off the price, and it comes down to 297 for this absolutely action-packed day. So I hope you'd all agree that we try and give a great deal of content on our webinars, on our speaking events, on anything we do. And our courses are no different. We literally pack everything we can into it. And one thing that we do, which I think we're quite unique actually in doing, is we actually offer 3 hand-holding webinars after all of our courses, which we run 3 times a year. So if you come away from the course and you kind of find a project, or you sort of come away and you're driving down the motorway and you think, oh, I thought I understood that, but you know what, I don't really. Then what we do on these webinars is up to 48 hours before, you can email in any question you want, or you can email in anything that you want us to cover or go over a little bit more, or in a little bit more depth, and so on. Put in what you want us to talk about, and on the hand-holding webinars, which are restricted only to people who've attended our courses, they are not open to the general public at all. These hand-holding webinars are very individual in everything. Then we can answer all your questions there, totally free of charge, and this is included in the cost of any of our courses that we do. So there we go, £297 for a really full day. Pretty confident that at the end of this day you should be able to go away, identify projects that you can do, know how to evaluate them. You should be, and we also also give you all the names, addresses and contact details of our power team, the people that we use that make things happen for us, and so on. So
so if you like Andrew's number,
you better come along to the course. Andrew's, oh my goodness, there's an awful lot of people on this webinar, I must say. So had a wonderful turnout tonight. So well, it's 8 o'clock.
do you want to run
now.
through one or two questions?
Oh, okay.
With the questions, because we've run out of time, if we can answer your question, we've got about a dozen questions.
Mm-hmm.
Will we have people?
One came in. Yeah, we can. Hopefully, we can get back. If we haven't answered your question on the webinar, we can hopefully get back and answer.
Yes, as long as your number or emails come through. Like we said, we're not IT people. Then we will get back to you within the next few days with an answer.
Okay. But one question here did said, I'm looking at a grade 2 listed commercial project to convert into flats, possibly some more built behind it as new builds. Who's the best person to talk to quickly analyse the cost to see if it's a good deal or not? If you want to send us an email, then I said I can send you this cost spreadsheet out. You might be able to run down it and just take a quick look at some of the costs that you might want to consider. So on, and then so particularly on the course, we always talk about how we analyse this. In a nutshell, work backwards. Look at your GDV and then take your costs off and work backwards. That's kind of the quickly and simple way of doing it. We've got what were the planning types here? A question from Caroline. Or was it Carol? I can't run out on the screen there. But what were the planning types here? We're talking about prior approval here, permitted development. If that's not applicable, and there's certain categories and certain situations where it's not applicable, then you're looking at full planning applications there. Change of use considerations to take into account there, which may need additional evidence. We're looking at listed buildings where you might need different architectural, historic audits and so on there, and we're talking about full planning applications there. So it kind of all sort of, you're talking about going into planning in some depth there, but you literally need to know whether or not you're in the realms of a prior approval app or whether you're out in the realms of a full planning application. I would suggest you talk to a CAD technician like Andrew, or somebody like a planning consultant to find out there if you're not absolutely sure which you fall under. And lastly, we've got conversion to multiple apartments. What about the affordable housing requirements? How do you address this problem? This is one of the advantages, you know, of the prior approval and so on, that you see, and with conversions, you're not creating new floor space. So if you're not creating new floor space, then CIL rarely comes into play, because that's, you know, that's when the CIL the community infrastructure levy comes into play. And so multiple appointments, the affordable housing, with permitted development, that's often not a consideration, but with full plan application, you're very much under the guidelines of what your local council sets their limit at. In Bristol, where we do most of our developments, 10 or under, you don't come under the section 106 affordable housing. In Gloucester, it's 15, it's very generous, but you know,
it does depend on your council. It does depend,
but some councils are very onerous, and anything over 1, you know. But again, it's getting a little bit more complicated there and so on. So there we go. I think there's quite a few questions come in here. So I think we're completely out of time now. So I think we're going to have to look at some of these questions possibly on maybe on Facebook or something like that over the next coming days.
If you can send us, I know you got your questions here, but like I said, if we haven't got your email or a number there, if you can put it on Facebook, and we will get back to you guys.
Or email us at jj@jjharling.com.
Yeah, that's the best way.
Other than that, the place to get all these questions answered and more is on the single 1-day intro course. So there we go. It's up on the screen now. Women Property Buyers Introduction Property Conversions 297, 48 hours from now to use the webinar offer, but we'll send it all out on a link to you anyway. So other than that, I hope you've
give the email address one more time.
I have actually sent the email address to everybody in the chat box and the question box, and also the link to purchase the tickets with a special offer code as well, Jane. So everybody's got that in their chat box. If you want to have a look there.
You're very diligent looking at this excellently.
That's right.
Other than that, I think we're completely out of time. Yeah, time now. So, is there anything else you wanted to add, Wendy?
I've also just put the link in the chat box earlier on to our Facebook page. I'll get all these questions over to you, Jane, that we've run out of time for. So, if anybody's asked a question that haven't answered it, make sure you go over and like the Facebook page, and I'll make sure that those answers to those questions get put onto the Facebook page. So, if everybody hops over to there, make sure you like it, and we'll get the answers up on there in the next day or two for everybody. Is that okay, Jane?
That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, really appreciate that.
That's excellent.
So other than that, then thank you all very much for joining us, and we hope you learned lots and gained lots of benefit.
Yeah, it's been great being with you tonight, guys.
Fantastic.
Hope to meet you again next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Good night then.
Bye.
Bye.